In this video, I'll show you how to bleed SRAM hydraulic brakes. To do this procedure, I would highly recommend getting this bleed kit from SRAM. It's going to have everything you need as far as the bleed blocks, the syringes. It even comes with the hydraulic brake fluid, and it comes with this device that helps you tighten up the compression nut. You'll also need a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench to get the brake pads out of the caliper. You'll need some gloves since we're working with DOT fluid. You'll want some rubbing alcohol and some paper towels. To bleed the newer SRAM road brakes, you're going to access the bleed port right here. On the older SRAM road brakes, you access it at the banjo bolt, which is down here at the caliper. On the newer SRAM road brakes, the banjo bolt is actually up inside the lever. On the mountain bike brakes, you would access the bleed port back here under this rubber cover at the back of the caliper. And the bleed port on the lever of mountain bike brakes is right here. The first thing that we want to do is prepare the syringes. One of the syringes we're going to fill half full with the brake fluid, and the other syringe we're going to fill 1/4 full. And with each syringe, what you're going to do is you're going to get some of the bubbles out. So I'm going to push up on the brake fluid, and we're going to try to get all the bubbles out of the hose, the little hose here. Use a wet paper towel or a rag, and then you want to just get all the bubbles out, all the air out that you can. The next thing that we're going to do is what SRAM calls degassing the fluid. So you're going to pull back on the plunger a little bit, and you don't want to pull too hard. If you start to see bubbles forming around the plunger, kind of coming around the plunger, you're pulling too hard. So you're just going to pull back a little bit, and you might see some bubbles forming kind of in the fluid. We're going to tap, let those bubbles form up, open the hose, push some of those bubbles out, and then you want to repeat this about 2 or 3 times per syringe. Now our syringes are prepared. I always like to close this off before I hook it up to the caliper and the brake lever. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other syringe, but the other one I'm going to fill just 1/4 full, not a half. First thing that you want to do is get the wheel off, so I'll be doing the front for this demonstration. Next, you'll want to remove the brake pads. There's a little retaining clip, and I find that it's best to take a pair of needle nose pliers and just lift that out. And then you take a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench, just unthread that, pull the bolt out, and the pads will lift right out. And I'm going to push up from the bottom. Next, we're going to install the bleed block. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is remove the bleed port screw. Again, this is the newer SRAM that has the banjo bolt up inside the brake lever, and so the bleed port screw is in a different location. So we're just going to lift that bleed port screw out, and then we're going to connect the syringe that's half full. The 1/4 full syringe goes up to the brake lever. And if you closed this, go ahead and open it up. Now on the brake lever, you'll want to pull back this rubber cover, and that will expose our bleed port. So we're going to remove this screw and hook up the syringe that's 1/4 full. So with a T10 Torx wrench, just remove this bleed port screw. And then go ahead and hook up the syringe that's 1/4 full. Get it pretty snug, and if you close this, open it up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to push this plunger down. Remember, the clamps are open on both. And as I push down, I should see up here at the brake lever, I should see the plunger kind of pushing out, and you'll probably see some air bubbles coming out as you do this. So we're pushing air out of the system. Now what you can do if you want is you can push back down on this. Just make sure there's no bubbles inside the little hose here. And you can push back down into the system. And so you're pushing the brake fluid back and forth. And then to finish up, I'm going to push back down on the caliper syringe. And you'll probably still see some more bubbles coming out up at the brake lever. All right, and I want to leave some left in the caliper syringe when I'm done. Now we're going to close off the lever syringe. And then we're going to pull the lever to the bar. And this is where you can use a rubber band or a tow strap to keep the lever pulled to the bar, because we're closing off the lever from the caliper. Okay, back down at the caliper, remember we have the lever syringe closed off, and we're just going to pull up and probably pull some air bubbles out of the system. And you don't want to pull too hard. You don't want to have air bubbles come past the plunger. I've bled this one pretty good, so I'm not getting any bubbles to pull out. So sometimes when you pull up on the plunger, you'll see some air bubbles coming out, but this looks like the system is bled pretty good and I'm not getting any bubbles coming out. All right, up at the lever, we're going to remove our rubber band or toe clip, but hold the brake lever in, don't let it out yet. Now down here at the caliper, what we're going to do is we're going to push down on the plunger. As we do, we're going to let the brake lever out with our fingers. Okay, I'm pushing down the plunger and then just let the brake lever out, and that pressurizes the system. Now we're going to close the clamp on the caliper syringe, and then we're going to remove the caliper syringe, and we're going to reinstall the bleed port screw. And it'll be pretty pressurized, so you'll probably have some hydraulic fluid just kind of dripping out a little bit. Don't worry about it. We'll just put that screw in as quick as possible. Okay, I've got the bleed port screw installed, and I'm just going to wipe everything off with some isopropyl alcohol, or at least a damp paper towel. And now we're going to open up the lever syringe, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull up and see if there's any bubbles that come out. You'll see a few there. There we go. And then you'll want to push back down, pressurize a little bit, pull up, and keep doing that until you stop seeing bubbles come out. And when you push down on the plunger, don't push too hard. SRAM says you can damage the system if you push too hard. So just gentle pressure, just a little bit pressurizing it. And do that until you stop seeing the bubbles come out. Then what you want to do is squeeze the brake lever, and you want to let it pop out 10 times. The final step is just to apply a little bit of pressure. So push down on your syringe, push down the plunger, again, not too hard. And we're done. So I always close this off. And then you're going to remove the syringe. And then you're going to reinstall your bleed port screw. Okay, so I've tightened the bleed port screw. Take a paper towel with some rubbing alcohol and just wipe everything down really well. And you probably want to come back in with a dry paper towel and wipe it down. Get it completely wiped off and dry. So when you're done, after you've made sure everything is wiped off really, really well with isopropyl alcohol, reinstall the brake pads. Obviously you got to just pull that bleed block out, reinstall your brake pads. Don't forget the little safety clip. Pop that back in there. And reinstall your wheel. So that is the procedure for bleeding SRAM hydraulic brakes. It's the same for mountain bike as it is for road. The procedure is the same, although the bleed port is going to be located maybe slightly different on the caliper and the lever, but the procedure is exactly the same as far as how you pressurize the system and do the bleeding. Any questions or comments, go ahead and drop them below. Thanks for watching.